Capitol Hoops here at St. John's College High School with new basketball coach Patrick Behan. Pat, we appreciate the time and look forward to getting to know you a little better.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for coming around.
You have a new position as the head coach here at St. John's. Before I get a little background on you, I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to the process of you getting this job. We know that you were an assistant here prior to going to Ryken, but just walk us through how you ended up here at St. John's.
Well, it was Friday morning. I was teaching at St. Mary's Ryken, and I got a text from Sean, and he told me to call him as soon as I could. We got on the phone, and he explained the situation, that he was going to IMG to accept the coaching position there, and that there was strong interest from St. John's to speak to me. And at that point, I got in touch with St. John's and had some good conversations, and not long after came to the decision that I was going to accept the head coaching position after it was offered.
And how long, what Friday was that? Prior to when the announcement was, how far was that?
I believe the announcement was Sean announced to his guys on Monday night. I announced to St. Mary's Ryken on Tuesday morning, and the call came the Friday before. So
it was very quick.
Pretty quick turnaround, yes.
But you had really created something special at Ryken, brought a program that hadn't had a lot of success to a very respectable team that appeared that they were going to be contending the next couple of years.
Definitely, and first and foremost, I was very proud of the 3 years at St. Mary's Ryken. Building it up each year and bringing in the quality student athletes that we had, and definitely had some momentum going into the next couple of years. And the hardest part about making the decision to come to St. John's, and it was definitely the kids and the relationships that you built over the last few years. So that was the hard part. Obviously, talking to the guys on that Tuesday morning, I was emotional because I did put my heart and soul into the last 3 years, and you saw the product that was rising up. But I'm thrilled to be here at St. John's, and again, the tough part was the decision with the kids at St. Mary's Ryken. But we've got great kids here at St. John's, and we've been hard at work since I've got the job these last couple of weeks, and things have been going really well, and I'm glad to be here.
Was it a difficult decision to come here, or was it, is this considered a dream job of yours? I mean, I know you have an affinity for St. John's. You were here prior to
Right. It's definitely a special opportunity to come back to where I started my high school coaching career. Sean and I came in the same year, and he's done a fantastic job with the program and the things that he's done in his time. And to come in with him and to get my feet wet in the WCAC here at St. John's, I know what a great place this is, and it was an opportunity that I could not pass up. And at the same time, very difficult to leave the kids and the relationship at St. Mary's Ryken, but an opportunity that I wasn't going to pass up.
We'll revisit this a little more later, but I want to just start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you went to school. We know you played for Bucknell, but just give us a little background on yourself.
Yep, grew up in Leesburg, Virginia, born and raised. Won a state championship at Notre Dame Academy. Had a very talented roster, a group of kids from kind of all over, and a lot of Division I talent. Went on to play at Bucknell University, played there for 4 years, and graduated in 2010. Played for two great coaches, Pat Flannery and Dave Paulson. Learned a lot from each of them. Then I played a little bit overseas, played in Germany, in Gotha, in the Pro B League. And then after that, I had my first college coaching job was at St. Mary's College for a year. And while I was at St. Mary's College, I spent pretty much every day in high school gyms. I was working part-time at a hotel down in Solomon's Island. I was working the 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift, and I would leave from there and head up to Baltimore or PG County, wherever it was that night, and to watch games. And through the course of that process, I realized that I wanted to get into high school coaching and teaching. And after the season, I had a successful season at St. Mary's College. I got into high school coaching here at St. John's with Sean. Right after he got the job, we connected on the phone. Shortly after, I was in that spring working here at St. John's, and had a great 2 years. After 2 years of being an assistant at St. John's, I was offered the head job at St. Mary's Ryken, and I moved down there to California, Maryland, and spent 3 great years there. Like you said, building up the program, the culture of the program, recruiting, successful student athletes that are, set to go on and play at the next level. Some already have, and here I am sitting in front of you, and running camp here from 8 a.m. to we got 5 p.m. for aftercare. So that's where we are now.
In addition to coaching basketball, do you have a role with the school, or what
Yes, I will be teaching freshman world geography.
Is that something that you did at Ryken as well?
No, I was in the English department at St. Mary's Ryken, and here I'm transferring over to get the social studies department, which I'm very excited about.
Is teaching something that you've done before, or is it kind of a new chapter?
Oh, I've done teaching before. It started at the substitute level, shortly after college, and then I got a full-time job at St. Elizabeth School in Rockville, Maryland. Spent 2 years there. So while I was an assistant at St. John's, I was teaching 4th and 5th grade, some middle school classes there at St. Elizabeth, and then the 3 years full-time teaching at St. Mary's Ryken.
Do you think your job teaching freshmen can benefit you in maybe learning some potential players you have, getting to know them off the court? I mean, do you think you'll be able to cultivate some of those relationships?
Yeah, and not necessarily just in the social studies classroom, but just being on campus in that day-to-day environment, all kids, whether freshman, JV, varsity, the whole program, seeing them interact, seeing them socially with their friends, because obviously it's one thing to be able to relate to them, on the court and you're talking in the locker room, but to see them in a different context, in an academic and social environment is pretty awesome. Something that I'm excited about, but not just with the St. John's players, but just the whole student body. We've got a large campus, kids from all kinds of backgrounds, a very diverse school. So for me to interact with them outside of the athletic complex is very important.
Recruiting is an integral part of coaching, especially in a league like the WCAC.
Mm-hmm.
How do your recruiting techniques, how do they differ from Ryken versus St. John's?
Well, I will say one major difference is location. At St. Mary's Ryken, we did a fantastic job of recruiting. Spent a lot of time in gyms, getting to know families, building that connection, and we were successful. Bringing some kids down to Leonardtown. But a lot of times you might get close with a student, and you get that call, "Hey, coach, if you were just 30 minutes closer, this or that." I don't really anticipate those calls as much here. Being in the prime location that we are, and I'll be very active in the recruiting scene, which I've been, as an assistant here, as a head coach in the league. That's not going to change. Those skills won't change, and we've got a staff that's, very, very dedicated to making sure that we bring in the right student athletes.
How were you so successful recruiting at Ryken? Were a lot of those players from that area, or
It was a mix. I think at St. Mary's Ryken you've got to find different angles because of the location and certain hurdles that there are. So we mixed and matched what we did as far as who we recruited, where we could recruit from. But, we did, try to draw from PG County, and basically it was about the relationships, understanding that, they were excited to come to the school. And, that's really what it came down to, is just, hard work and making sure that, you built that relationship, and that, the kids felt comfortable making that drive down. And, the process doesn't really change here, as far as the teams that you want to recruit, the organizations that you look at. So not a lot changes in that. It's just a different program, and a program that's going to attract a lot of very talented student athletes from quality families.
You mentioned a second ago your assistants working as hard as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me with the situation with your assistants. Did you bring any assistants from Ryken, or are you keeping the same? What was the situation with that?
The process is still getting figured out, but a good handful of assistants that were here already on staff at St. John's, and a good amount that I worked with my previous time here, are staying on board, which is great. So familiarity is there, relationships with the kids, knowing the lay of the land in the area and the school here itself. So they're all excited to stay on board. So got a great returning group, as well as I'm adding a couple new faces to staff, as well as a couple coaches possibly from St. Mary's Ryken as well.
Talk to us about, I guess, the landscape of St. John's basketball. You've got Casey Morsell, Trey Wood, Richard Njoku returning.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the program this year? Who would your leaders be aside from those guys? Just talk to us about where St. John's basketball is as you take over the program.
Mm-hmm. Well, you started with the seniors. Those guys returning is very important. This is their 4th year in the program. And also guys that I know, because as an assistant here before, recruiting those guys and them coming onto campus here kind of as I was leaving, but you still have that relationship with them. So it's been a positive transition. I'm going to lean on the seniors for leadership. But you look at a guy like Casey Morsell, who's here working camp for us this week, and he's in the gym early. He's the last one to leave. True gym rat. He's having a fantastic spring. Really came along in the second half of last season, and he's growing as a leader as well. Vocally, but also really leading by example. Ishmael, sophomore, got some great minutes as a freshman. And think he's had a very productive spring as well. And we've got a very talented roster from those guys I mentioned to other guys that maybe didn't get as much playing time or experience. Some young guys, JV guys, moving up in the program, and then some quality freshmen coming in. So freshmen through seniors, we're going to rely on all of them to provide leadership in their own ways.
What do you see the biggest challenges being with your new role coming back here, and maybe not being super familiar with some things that may have changed over the last couple of years? What do you see your biggest hurdles being?
I think it's just a natural transition. Any coach at any level, any sport goes to a new job. There's going to be a transition. So, although I have familiarity with the players, it still is going to take some time for maybe a couple of the calls are different offensively and defensively. Coaching philosophy, while it is pretty similar to Sean, having worked on staff with him, things will be different. So just them adjusting to me adjusting to them, just the natural process here over the next few months.
Turnover in the coaching world is very commonplace. Obviously, Sean just left. You just came here. At some point, you'll probably get an offer to go coach somewhere else. Talk to me about what goes into deciding whether or not that's the best move for not just you, but your family and everyone else who's a part of that decision.
Well, truthfully, it's not something that you think about until it happens. Like I said, when I got the text and the call from Sean, it was my focus at that time was grading American Lit projects on The Great Gatsby. So your focus, you're all in on the task at hand, which for the last 3 years was doing the best I could at St. Mary's Ryken. So when I get the call and I talk to Sean, then your head starts spinning a little bit. You sit down, you take a step back, you think about it. And again, it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up, knowing how much I respected this place and the 2 years that I had and starting here. So I think every situation is a little bit different. If it was a call from somewhere else, I may not have returned the call, or I may not have made the decision I made, because I think it's a case by case situation. You want to weigh your options and look at the overall landscape of things. So it's really just case by case.
Pat, talk to us a little bit about your coaching style, about where you adopted that style, just as a basketball coach, what your beliefs are.
Mm-hmm. As far as where I got stuff from, it's a mix and match. I think everyone realizes the resources that are out there. The game of basketball's been around for a long time, so everyone's taken something from somebody, and any coach that says otherwise is lying to you. So just growing up, playing for different coaches, things that you like, things that you don't like. Offensively, the philosophy that I've tried to embrace is sharing the basketball. I know it can be tough, with the mixtapes and the highlights, and it's a focus on a lot of one-on-one dribble moves. But if you can really get a team that shares the basketball, you look at the Golden State Warriors, prime example, the talent that they have, but the fewest dribbles per possession. So if you can really share the ball, screen, get the ball hot, have an energy, that's how we want to play. Ultimately, you can make up for a lot of sins when you have some kids that can put the ball in the basket, that can create their own shot when the time comes. So a mix and match of being able to share it, but also have the talent and the horses to put the ball in the hoop. Defensively, primarily a man-to-man defensive team over the years. I think it breeds communication. It holds accountability individually, while also being able to rely on the 4 other guys on the court to help you out as well. So we'll be a primarily man-to-man team. I'll be able to mix and match some other things, but man-to-man is definitely a staple of the program, and that's something that won't change. And then just really being able to execute when the time comes. In the WCAC, you're going to have a lot of heavyweight battles that you're going to have to be able to execute in the half court on both ends.
Talk about competing in the WCAC. Everyone knows it's arguably the best conference in the country, if not the best. So many good teams, so many good players. How much time do you put into scouting each program?
A lot.
Expand on that.
Yeah. So we have to be very aggressive in terms of scouting, whether it's at St. Mary's Ryken, St. John's, any school. I believe in being prepared, and that's something that I learned from Sean. You have to have a game plan going in. So we'll never go into an opponent blind on what they're going to do, especially in the conference with the amount of times that you can see them. You play everyone twice. So, not just studying film, but we'll live scout. We'll go to games and watch and take our notes and, rely on the whole staff to be involved and, have their say in it and, put their best foot forward in terms of getting the kids in the best positions to win. And that's ultimately what you want to do, is you want to give them all the resources necessary to be ready on the court. So whether it's, play calls, tendencies, things personnel-wise, things to look at. So scouting is a huge part of it. And I think each year I've gotten much better with that, and the experience definitely helps being in the league.
How about, I'm curious as to your hierarchy with assistant coaches. There's a lot of turnover in the assistant coach world.
Yep.
Most assistant coaches want to be head coaches. How do you delegate responsibilities to assistant coaches and make sure that all the assistants aren't doing the same thing? Just how does that work in your?
Well, at the high school level too, everyone's different. You have your certain assistant coaches that might be in the building. They might work 9 to 5. So some might be single, young, and can get out on the road and recruit more than one that's got a 9 to 5 job and 4 kids. So things are different for everyone. Everyone's got a unique situation, especially at the high school level. It's not like college, but in a lot of ways we try to run it like a college program. So with that, you've got your player development, you've got your recruiting, you've got your scouting, game preparation. Those are 4 assets that you really want all your coaches to be involved in as much as possible. So that's kind of how it works.
So you're recruiting a player to come to St. John's or to Ryken. Take me through that process. You go to the PYBL or you go to a AAU tournament, something where you see these young kids playing. What happens from that point to the point where they make their high school decision?
Right. So being visible is very important. Get out to the games. Watching and evaluating is the first part, but just being visible and having the families and the kids realize that you're there to watch them, and you appreciate their talents, and you want to possibly recruit them as a student athlete. Then you start kind of building that relationship with the family. Being able to talk to them. I'm not a fan of being that coach that sits with the parent the entire game and bothers them, because ultimately they want to watch their kid play basketball. There's plenty of time to talk to them, but you do have the conversations in the gym, whether it's before the game, after the game, a little bit here and there during the game, and it kind of builds, and you try to get the student athletes that you want to recruit onto campus, and ultimately try to get a shadow day, and just see how comfortable they are with the school, the campus, the team, the academic environment, and hopefully it's a good fit for those that do get on campus.
This is one of your final opportunities to lace it up, all right, in front of your fans, your family here in DC. All right, represent yourselves, your schools, and all the work that you put in. All right, play hard, play tough, and let's get out of there with a win on Saturday.
You've coached some amazing players, and you've coached against some amazing players in your job from assistant coach to where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to give me a short list of some of the best players you've ever coached against, where would you go with that?
Whew. Short list is tough. My first year here, Chris Jenkins was a phenomenal player here at Gonzaga. Ran the table in the regular season. Melo Trimble was probably the toughest player to stop. You couldn't stop. My first year, St. John's here, we went to the conference championship game, lost close game to O'Connell, and Melo was fantastic. And you try to do a lot of different things, but ultimately there was no answer. Then here at St. John's, Anthony Cowan was one that was quite tough to handle. He poured some in on us, and Chris Likes, just some names that are coming to mind. Aaron Thompson was a great defensive player, so you don't really talk about that as much because you're scouting the offensive personnel a lot, but things that he could do defensively. I'm probably missing the handful of guys, but those are some that come to mind.
Oh, yeah.
And I apologize. The future number 1 pick in the draft, Markelle Fultz, but shows you how good he is because he makes his teammates better too, and which is what he'll do at the next level. But I'd be a fool not to throw his name in there as well.
Give me some top memories you've had in your tenure, your career coaching.
I would say, first year, we were playing DeMatha in the quarterfinals up at Gallaudet before they moved everything to the home and away sites, and we were winning against DeMatha. We were up by 1, just a few seconds left. There was a timeout, and we're in the huddle. Sean and I and the rest of the staff telling all the guys just keep everyone in front. If they hit a crazy 75-foot shot, tip your cap, but just no fouls. Keep guys in front. And then there was a tough call on Darian Anderson, and DeMatha went to the foul line with just over a second left. Made both free throws. Made the first one. We tried icing them. Made the second, but during that timeout, we had a play on. So makes the free throw. We try to get a back screen, throw it deep, and the ball actually got tipped. Ended up in Darian Bryant, aka Jelly's hands, and he let it fly from just beyond half court and went in at the buzzer. We ended up winning the game, beat Ireton in the next round, then we played for the WCAC championship. So that individual moment was pretty special in a playoff setting. That's up there. You know, some of the stuff, the second year at St. John's, we won, I want to say, 25 straight games. You know, we were top 10, top 15 in the USA Today, Washington Post, #1 for a while. Had a great stretch with a loaded roster that second year. And then at St. Mary's Ryken, you know, we talked about building it up and winning some of the games that we did and bringing in the student athletes that we did. Just that and more so the process each year, kind of watching the young kids grow. My second year at St. Mary's Ryken, we started 3 freshmen and 2 sophomores, and seeing where they are now on the not only the local landscape but the national landscape. And then probably my memory so far since being here is just getting in the gym with the guys the first day, and you know, back on campus here at St. John's as the head coach.
What was it like that first day that you came to St. John's after being named head coach and meeting with the guys? I mean, I'm sure it had to have been pretty special.
It was a hectic day. I was ready for a glass of water and something to eat after it was over, because I spent a lot of hours on the phone, you know, communicating with the St. Mary's Ryken families, trying to make sure everything was okay there and get everyone situated, you know, first and foremost. And then on the drive up here, you know, get ready to meet the guys, communicating with the St. John's parents, the families. And then from that point on, you know, kind of just business as usual going forward here on campus.
What do you think it will take to win a WCAC championship this year? I mean, you've got the personnel. Mm-hmm. Obviously, competition is fierce.
Yep.
But what do you think you're going to need to get these guys to buy in? What do you think it's going to take?
Well, you know, I think we've got a great thing going already, you know, with some experience and returning guys and, you know, philosophy being similar that we talked about earlier. So my job isn't necessarily to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to, you know, take the next step forward. And I think that, you know, starts with defense. You know, that's got to be our staple. You know, we're not going to be the biggest team in the conference. We're not going to be the most athletic team. We certainly have the talent and the pieces and the leadership in place, I believe. But, you know, we're going to have to, you know, fight, claw, and defensively do the little things, communicate excellent. Then offensively, you know, we're going to have to make sure that we get quality shots, because we do have talent, but I don't think we have necessarily, you know, 2-3 players that are going to average 20 a game type of situation. So we're going to really have to rely on each other and just be a great team. And I think that was, you know, what happened a couple years ago when St. John's won the championship. Although Anthony was a phenomenal player, you know, player of the year, there was a handful of guys that had to be held accountable for.
What kind of advice would you give to maybe an aspiring coach who wanted to be in your shoes one day? Maybe a kid who's playing high school basketball in the area right now who wants to stick around the game but doesn't know exactly what they want to do. What kind of advice would you give to someone like that?
Really just effort, you know, and that goes with all aspects. So things that we've probably touched on for this interview, you know, whether it's recruiting, player development, scouting, preparation, because the more effort you give, the more visible you are, the more things that you do, you're going to learn as you go forward. So that was my biggest thing, you know, from day one when I was here as an assistant was, you know, I was going to put my best foot forward. I was all in, you know, on making St. John's a better program. I was all in on making St. Mary's Ryken a better program. So you just gotta work. You gotta put the effort in. Obviously, connections is important, but you don't want to be that guy that's trying to force connections. You let your work kind of speak for itself and become visible in gyms. And you know, as long as the kids know how hard you're working, you build that relationship with them. So the biggest thing is effort and the willing to get things done. You got to be aggressive. If you want to be a successful coach, you got to constantly work at it, study things, and really self-evaluate. Because I think a lot of times we get caught up in, you know, I do this well, I do that well, but we all have weaknesses. I have my weaknesses as a coach. You know, I'm still learning and growing, and my goal, you know, each day is to get better with it. Whether that's watching NBA film, watching, you know, games from 5 years ago, high school games, whatever it is, you know, you got to find an avenue to get better with it. And, you know, be your biggest critic. Your biggest critic has to be yourself, ultimately.
Pat, talk to me a little bit about culture, how important culture is in the locker room or even in the school, and what your thoughts are in terms of establishing a basketball culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think culture is probably one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot at all levels. You know, you hear new coaches talk about culture. But the best way to breed a positive culture and a successful atmosphere is really that year-round phase. So even though, you know, you think of high school, you think of college, you separate the two, but we try to run it as much as like a college program as possible in terms of the effort and the development that you put into the kids. So I think with culture, you're looking at not just the season, but the off-season stuff. Are the guys around each other? Are they communicating? Like, for example, this morning, camp is going on, so we've got some alums working camp, and Casey's working camp here, but we had a team lift at 9 a.m. So the guys get here, 8:30, 8:45. They're lifting together. Ends at 10:30. They don't all just necessarily get in the car and go home. They're hanging around the locker room. All right, they're building that chemistry. They may not be working camp, but they're out there and they're watching the 8 and 9-year-olds play basketball, and just that hanging out phase. So I think culture comes with chemistry, and then the coaches making sure that it's a year-round thing, that you have all aspects covered within the program.
How about AAU basketball? AAU has really evolved into what it is today compared to in years past. I'm curious what your thoughts on AAU are and how it really kind of dominates the basketball landscape, even more than high school in a lot of people's eyes.
No question. Yeah, I mean, AAU basketball gets a bad rap. I think people that don't know the game as much just say, oh, AAU basketball is bad for the game. Now, depending on the program and the level of development or lack thereof, it could be detrimental. But when you're talking about some of the higher level talent in the area, which, as we know, Washington, D.C., generates the best high school talent, go on to the next level, no question about it. You're dealing with some coaches that know what they're doing. They're putting the kids, for the most part, in the best situation to be successful, and it's a numbers game. The college season goes on the same time as the high school season, so naturally you're not going to get 75 coaches, 150 coaches in a gym during the high school season when everyone else is playing and practicing at the same time. But in the spring and the summer, you can pack the gym with coaches, and that's kind of their avenue and platform to be recruited. And then you get in the high school season, and certainly the events and the level of competition that WCAC has, you're going to attract a lot of college coaches. But they're in season, so they're more following up with what they saw during the AAU season. So it's two different worlds and landscapes, AAU and high school basketball. But I think the best high school programs and coaches respect the importance that AAU basketball has in these kids' lives, and you just try to make sure that your kids are involved with the best programs possible.
As a high school coach, talk about your interaction with different AAU programs. Obviously, you have kids playing for them. You may be recruiting players who play on the middle school level for different AAU teams. But what is, as a high school coach, what is your interaction with all these different teams like?
It's interesting because, like you said, you're watching kids at the middle school level and trying to establish, who's on your radar to maybe be in the program, and then, sometimes you deal with transfers and, trying to make sure certain kids stay in the school, and it can go a lot of different ways. But in my past, I've, liked to be, a positive influence in the gym and build that relationship with various AAU coaches. And like I said, our kids play for different AAU programs. It's not just one. We have a handful of kids that are playing with 3, 4, 5, quality organizations. So you want to just make sure that, you stay on top of things and have communications with their coaches, whether it's just following up, how they're doing, if you can help them, if they can help you. It's just connections through being visible, like I talked about earlier.
What is your relationship like with other coaches in the WCAC? Obviously, you guys have a lot in common. But at the same time, you're recruiting against the same players, you're competing night in and night out.
Yep.
But you've got to be around these guys, off the court a lot as well. Talk to me about that rapport.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we all have in common is we want to beat each other. But, we also have in common that we all respect each other. We know how much effort goes into this. I think we're probably the only ones that know. There's a select few outside of it, maybe the families that understand the time that gets put into it. But we know what we're all trying to do, and it's not just about winning games. The efforts you're putting in with the kids in the classroom and making sure that they're having study halls and doing the homework, and then you talk about the recruiting and the scouting, community activities. It's really a lot that goes into it, and I think a lot of times people get caught up in maybe it's playing time or how many points so and so scores, but it's really a 365 job, and you put a lot of long hours into it for the sake of for the student athletes. So I think we respect each other. It can get intense. I've had a couple intense moments with a couple coaches, but those same coaches, off the court, I'm probably the closest with. So definitely.
But I'm curious through your playing career, what big time players you've gone up against, what moments in your career have really stood out against going up against big time guys.
Right. Playing at Bucknell, I played against a lot of talented guys, especially in the non-conference. But I could probably go with the top 5 just straight from this area. Washington D.C., best high school hoops in the nation. Guys that were my age, my year, or right around. I'd probably have to go with backcourt of Ty Lawson, probably the quickest point guard I was ever around. Chris Wright, probably the best scorer, leading scorer here in the history of St. John's. Kevin Durant, for sure, no question about it. He kind of surpassed me at that 15U AAU level. And then go Scotty Reynolds, fantastic scorer out of Herndon, and Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay when he was at Spalding, a little bit older than I was, but fantastic player.
So here's the big question: if there was a pickup game amongst all high school coaches today, and you had the first pick, who would your pick be?
So I'm already on the team.
You're the coach. You can't
I'm the
play.
coach. I can't play. Okay.
Who would your first 2 picks be?
Oof, tough. Some of the older coaches in the league I know could play back in the day, but not necessarily see them as much. That's tough. But if you had to go with a short list, Tim Fudd at Carroll was a very good player. When he actually first got into the high school coaching there as a head coach, played against him a couple times. Definitely Fudd, very competitive. Mike Jones was a very good player, Old Dominion. And I would throw in assistant coach here on staff, Lamar Butler. Lamar was a major piece in the Final Four run that George Mason had, and he still can get after it and show off to our guys in the gym. So he would be my wild card pick.
All right, Pat. We appreciate the time. Last thing I want to do is just give you a platform. If there's anything that you think is important that you want to talk about, I know you don't have that platform to, talk to a lot of people outside of St. John's or Ryken. But if there's anything you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
Appreciate it. Yeah. First and foremost, as I said before, thrilled to be here. Great opportunity, and I'm really, really excited about it. Fortunate for the time that I had at St. Mary's Ryken, and obviously those kids have done a lot, and I'm going to stay following them and wish them the best, and be supportive of them through their process. And just any advice for some of the younger coaches out there that are getting into it, don't be afraid to struggle. At first, whether you're getting on as an unpaid assistant, you're volunteering somewhere at a D3 school or just working camps, just be aggressive, be hungry, and just kind of build your coaching philosophy and put everything you got into it, and ultimately you put all your chips into the table, and you see what happens from that point on.
All right, Pat. We appreciate the time and look forward to what you bring here to the Cadets this upcoming season.
I appreciate it.